Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. We're going to still wait a few minutes to start this call close to that 2:30 mark. And it looks like all of you are muted, but if you're not, let's be sure that you go ahead and mute while you're joining us on the call. And we'll get started here shortly. Hi, Justin. Thanks for being here. Jennifer, I think we're going to go ahead, since I have both of my guest speakers for the call this afternoon. Let's go ahead and start the meeting, and we'll get moving here to take advantage of everybody's time.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Tracy Trulove, and I'm one of the CDOT PIOs that's supporting the Glenwood Canyon response. I will be joined today by Region 3 Regional Transportation Director Mike Goolsby and White River National Forest hydrologist Justin Anderson. Just to kind of talk about the flow for today's meeting, I'd really like to give Mike and Justin a chance to present to you the update information on where we're at with the canyon. And then I'll go ahead and open it up to questions. And if you'll use the raise hand function next to your name, I'd really love to be able to moderate that through the raise hand function. I'll also mention that we have many people joining this call that may not be members of the media. So if we could let the media folks get their questions answered first at the end of the presentation piece, I'm happy to stay on. And I know Elise Thatcher from CDOT is also here, and we can both stay on and answer maybe any other operational questions or questions you have about what's happening in the canyon. So again, thank you for being here with us today. With that, I'm going to move it over to Mike Goolsby, Regional Transportation Director, to kick us off. Mike.
Thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon, all. Basically, I'm going to start with where we're at from an operational perspective in Glenwood Canyon. Currently, we have both directions closed. During the last 24 hours, as you all know, we got an exorbitant amount of rain. We had three of the drainages impacted in Glenwood Canyon, one of them being the Cinnamon Creek drainage, which flows over and around the top of our Hanging Lake Tunnel complex. That was a fairly sizable flow and impacted the railroad tracks, and in addition to impacted an area above our Hanging Lake Tunnel complex. So that's one of the areas that we are concentrating on. Second part is out around the 129.4 area of the interstate, both eastbound and westbound. Currently, we're working on that area. One of the issues that we are running into is the drain system in the middle of the interstate is plugged. And so every time we get that drain unplugged, more water inundates that. And so until we can get that drain unplugged and some of the material out of there to prevent it from overtopping the road the next time it happens, that's one of the issues. But our main issue, and bear with me, hopefully this works, and I can share the screen. If somebody would let me know, Tracy, if you guys can see that.
Yeah, we can see that, Mike. It looks great.
Okay, so what we are looking at here is one of the cameras in Glenwood Canyon that is at mile marker 122.4 eastbound. The picture you're currently looking at is downstream of the Colorado River. Last night, one of the debris flows that came out was in the Devil's Hole, which is basically south of the railroad tracks on the other side of the interstate. This debris flow was quite large. It basically dammed off the river, and it found the path of least resistance when it started to flow again. And what that path of least resistance was the bike path and up against the eastbound travel portion of the highway. Currently, due to the fact that the majority of the water is traveling, as you can see, right up against the interstate, we have some scour concerns with that. We don't know if it's undercutting the road or not. And through our engineering staff and others, we have deemed that until we can get in there and look at it, it is not safe. So I'm going to pan around here first before I move on. As you can see, there's quite a substantial amount of debris in the river, and there's quite a amount of debris past where it's dammed up. So with that being said, I'm going to unshare my screen at this time, and then I'm going to get into a little bit more. So with that being said, couple of things that we are currently doing is we have a long reach excavator. It's got a larger arm on it, and we are bringing that in to work on setting some diversionary bags in there to get the water away from the interstate itself, and to hopefully cut somewhat of a pilot channel through the river, or at least through a portion of that debris field, so that it'll start eroding itself in the proper channel so that we can get the water away from the interstate. Once that is done and we can actually inspect what damage has been done to the edge of the interstate and everyone feels safe with that, then we will start looking at opening eastbound. Once everything occurs eastbound and we feel safe, we will open eastbound. And I don't know that there's a time frame around that. It will depend on how much damage has been done underneath that wall. Westbound, hopefully that is a little better news at some point today, but until we get that drain cleared and we can get the mud and the remaining water off of the road westbound will remain closed as well. Tracy, I think I'm going to leave it at that so that Justin can go, and then leave a little bit of time at the end for some more specific questions. And I would look to you and Elise to see if I missed anything.
No, Mike, I think that was a good wrap up. So we'll go ahead and let Justin come online. And again, Justin Anderson is the White River National Forest hydrologist, and he's got some slides to share with all of us. And then we will turn around and open it up for question and answer.
Tracy, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but you're kind of quiet, Justin. Can you talk a little bit louder into the mic?
I can speak up, but I'll also tell you, I just had to leave the meeting because I lost the audio.
Okay.
So I just rejoined, and had you just asked me to show slides?
Yeah, if you can go ahead. Mike just finished his update. So if you could go ahead and you want to share your screen, and you might just have to talk a little bit louder because you sound a little bit quiet.
Okay, I'm going to give this a try here. Stand by. Are you able to see my screen now?
Not yet. Okay.
Well, please let me know when you can see it.
Okay. Hey, Jennifer, do you want to put your email in the chat? And Justin, we can also have you email your slides to Jennifer, who's running our meeting, and she could probably get them up.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
Justin, I'm going to text you Jennifer's email real quick. All right, folks, just bear with us for a minute. We're going to work through some of the technical difficulties. Justin, I just texted you Jennifer's email address. So if you want to try to shoot your slides to her real quickly, that would be great.
Sure thing. I'll email that right over.
So media partners, while we're working on that piece, we also, Elise Thatcher and I have been working to put some updated images into the media kit link that we had from yesterday. We actually even got some drone footage today that we'll be able to put in there after this meeting. So we will have some updated photos for you. Justin, do you want to just kind of start chatting with the team about the scenario we see out there until we get your slides going, or would you prefer we wait for your slides?
Well, sure thing. The imagery that you just showed and that you emailed over is new to me. It's pretty dramatic. I can tell you that I was out doing some mapping of debris flows that had occurred before Wednesday. And I just recently gave a short presentation that compared some observations that we've recently seen with what our BEAR team had predicted last year. The BEAR team, BEAR stands for Burned Area Emergency Response. The Forest Service had a BEAR team that produced a number of products when they, near the conclusion of the Grizzly Creek fire last year. The products included some prediction of debris flow occurrence likelihood. And now that we're starting to see debris flows associated with recent storms in the Grizzly Creek fire area, we are able to compare and reference the debris flow modeling, and we are seeing some interesting results from that. Are you guys hearing me okay?
You're still a little bit light on audio. Do you have a way to turn yours up a little bit or get closer to your microphone?
Unfortunately, I'm not hearing any responses,
Oh, Justin, can you hear me?
so I can't tell if you guys are able to hear me.
Oh. Phew. We can hear you, but it's really light. It sounds like you might have lost audio.
Hi, Justin. This is Jennifer. I'm not sure if you can hear, but you may need to exit and come back in. And I haven't received those slides yet. Thanks.
So Tracy, for the sake of everyone's time, do we want to kind of jump into questions while Justin's working on his stuff?
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I seem to be having some technical difficulties. I'm not able to hear anyone on the audio. So I'm afraid this might be unworkable. I can leave and try to rejoin. And then maybe Jennifer will have my slides by then. I'll give that a try.
Okay. Yeah, Mike, let's go ahead and do that. Thanks for hanging in there with us all. So why don't I go ahead and look and see if I've got anybody who's raised their hand, and then I'll also look to the chat. So if you have questions for Mike around the operations piece of what's currently happening, we can jump into those. Can any of our media partners hear?
I can hear you, Tracy.
You can hear me okay? All right. Shoot.
So I don't know if this is a question for CDOT or someone else. This is Peter with the Post Independent. About 11:25 a.m., we got a notification from Garfield County about debris coming down the river soon. Does that still stand? Or is that no longer the case? And what was the cause of that too?
So Peter, I think this is Mike. I think from the perspective of that notice, what it was the power plant opening one of their spillways to clear some of the debris on the top of the spillway so that they could start diverting more water through the power plant itself to assist us in alleviating some of the water pressure on the interstate. If you saw my pan of the videos, the debris they probably are referencing is that smaller stuff that's up above the actual debris flow itself. There's nothing downstream from that currently, and based on what's coming down right now, it's coming in small pieces. It's not going to come all at once, just based on some of the information we received from the folks this morning. Even if it does cut a pilot channel through there, it's not going to move very quickly at all. I don't know if that helped or not.
That does. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, it's Jason Luber from Denver 7. What is the worst case scenario when you get the water away from the interstate and you look at what kind of damage has been done there? What would be the worst you could see, and what's the best you could see?
Well, the worst would be is how much it's undermined the footers for that wall. Those footers of that wall are under what they call spread footers. So they basically are setting on the rock and the ground right there, versus caissons that are driven down into the rock. So worst case scenario, what would be is a lot of that eroded out and a lot of it is scoured up underneath the roadway. In that instance or that case, once they've been able to evaluate it, they could run some numbers and do some evaluation on whether or not we would be safe to open one lane eastbound. Erring on the side of safety and caution right now, not knowing what that looks like specifically, that's part of the reason that we're uncomfortable opening it, because it could be scoured farther underneath there than what we might think. So with that being said, once we get they're basically large sandbags that we're going to fill with debris to try to push the water away from that so they can look at it. Best case scenario is, for those of you that have been around a while and in the years where we have high water in Glenwood Canyon and the bike path gets washed away, and then we go in and make repairs to it. Best case scenario is there's not as much as we would think, and we would be able to do some temporary repairs until we could get in there to make permanent repairs. Did that answer that, Jason?
Yes, it did. It did. And so
Jason?
when,
Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, if you've got follow-up, go ahead. I've got some chat questions coming in.
I guess it was just the time frame of how long you think that's going to take to divert the water and then make those determinations whether you could open a lane or not and get weekend traffic moving once again.
That's a really good question. And part of it is when the equipment arrives, getting it transported up there. They're in the process of doing that right now. And working with the Army Corps engineers and others to get clearances to be able to do that. I'm not going to give you a time frame because right now I don't know. A lot of it is best case scenario that there's not a lot of undercutting of that. And it's just a matter of getting the channel moved, and then we could probably open one lane up. But right now, that's the $1 million question, I guess, from the perspective of where we're at in the process. And that was an unforeseen circumstance of something that we weren't really looking for, because we were more worried about the road surface. We didn't think we'd be impacted by the stuff across the river. So unfortunately we are. Sorry, I can't give you a more specific question or answer to that one, but I just don't know the answer.
And real quick, finally, what about a one lane configuration on one side of the interstate?
That will be driven by what we find as soon as we get the water. If this is going to be long-term, then we're going to evaluate that. But right now, if we can at some point today get westbound open and alleviate some of that traffic westbound, then we'll have that conversation. But it's not an easy task just due to the fact that there's not a lot of ways around the canyon.
Thanks a lot.
Mike, let me go ahead and ask this question that came in the chat. So for this coming weekend, what's the best advice for going through the area?
Best advice for going through the area is if we're fortunate enough to have everything work out in our favor today, I would recommend traveling early, watching the weather, referring to co-trip, and doing those things that we do when we travel in the mountains, whether it's wintertime or summertime. We always watch the weather. Unfortunately, it may not be the best news to have to travel around Glenwood Canyon, but it may be the only option at this point.
Great, thanks, Mike. I have a question from one of our reporters up near Steamboat, talking about how the traffic is pretty terrible on the alternate route. Is there anything that we can do to help?
That's a really good question. I think with our CSP partners and some of our other local law enforcement agencies and communicating with everyone, it's unfortunate, but we're doing the best we can. There have been numerous suggestions by stakeholders as far as additional signage, additional VMS boards, some of those things. Unfortunately, right now, we're not the only one experiencing this statewide. Up in Region 4, as you probably all know, the Poudre Canyon and State Highway 14, specifically in our Region 3, Highway 125, and we had some mudslides down on Highway 149 last night. So we're stretched pretty thin with additional resources for traffic control and other things, but we're bringing resources in from around the state. And again, we're hoping that folks are understanding, and we're doing the best we can with the alternate routes, but unfortunately there's not a lot of them to get from one side to the other.
Morgan, Neely, if you're on, do you want to just go and ask your question, unmute and ask your question? KDNK.
Hi, yeah, this is Morgan Neely with KDNK. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to ask if anyone can give some insight into if the understanding of the long-term viability of this stretch of interstate is changing, given the burn scar, the increasing frequency of these kind of flash flooding and scouring events. And I know that we're looking at sort of the acute situation right now, but I wonder if someone could speak to the longer term implications. Thanks.
That's a really good question, and we probably could have an hour-long conversation, if not longer, on that one. But I think one of the things that we look at, and we're really starting to look at from a CDOT perspective, is resiliency in our system. And resiliency is one of those things, whether it's alternate routes, it's making improvements to those alternate routes. It's looking at mitigation, things that we can do in stretches of road that are subject to these things, whether it's rockfall, avalanche, or other things. Unfortunately, right now, as the weather lessens and some of those things, and the vegetation and stuff will start growing back, that's one of those things that will dissipate to some degree with Glenwood Canyon. But unfortunately, right now, the one thing that we've needed on the western slope is water and rain, and we haven't had a monsoon season in a couple of years, and we're getting one this year. And so it's definitely a federal level discussion, and it's also a state level discussion about resiliency in our networks. And we look at that frequently on our projects to see if there's things we can do to make it better.
I'm going to ask if Courtney Fromm from Fox 31. Courtney, you want to ask your question to Mike?
Yeah, I guess kind of off of the road and alternate routes, a question that was asked earlier, the type of damage that will happen to these roads with semi-traffic coming through them, are they able to handle that? Are you guys expecting long-term damage just from an extreme amount of extra heavy traffic?
Courtney, that specifically back to the resiliency question, or the resiliency answer. It's one of those things that we've really tried really hard to look at these alternate routes and try to work on them. They're not all to that level yet of not being able to take this abuse, and that's one of the things that we're working on. But I'll give you a really good example. State Highway 13 from Craig down basically from the state line towards Rifle is one of the highest resiliency areas that we identified, one for this situation and two for a lot of the truck traffic that's up there. And we've been slowly reconstructing State Highway 13 to meet that. With limited funds, trying to get all of them done at once is difficult. But, US 40 is a priority, State Highway 9, 131, all of those for the northern detour route. But we will have to go out and do some additional maintenance and to take care of some of these areas that are beat up pretty bad. Did that help?
Yeah, thank you.
I don't see any other media partner questions in the chat. Is there any other media partners that would like to ask a question to Mike?
If anybody had to make a guess, when might westbound reopen?
That was a nice try, Peter, but I'm not going to give you a guess.
Yeah, Peter, I think it's important to know we've had crews out there, round the clock. In fact, that's one of the things that CDOT's been doing a fantastic job is bringing in reinforcements. So we've got crews that have been out there with, the dump trucks and the several loaders and working, the scenario around the clock. But we also recognize that if we gave you a potential estimate and then we missed it, we would have a lot of cranky people on our hands. So right now, the canyon is just going to continue to be closed, and as quick as we can get to opening, we'll be sure to let you know.
I guess one final question from me and Glenwood. Any concern about, just this current situation being compounded by forecast rains tonight and tomorrow as well?
Mike, you want to grab that, or you want me to take it?
You can take a swing at it, Tracy. It all depends on where they set up. Where the weather, if it sets up over one of these drainages, and depending on what impacts are around it. We're working very closely with the National Weather Service office out of Grand Junction. They're supported by the other two National Weather Service offices. We have our own staff meteorologists that are working with us as well. And erring on the side of safety is paramount to this, because one, I don't want to get anybody caught in there that's a traveling public person, and I don't want to get any of my folks caught in there either. So it could add insult to injury, but the flip side of it is not knowing with some of these drainages that have run, if more is going to come down or less in the same type of event. That one's kind of a swag, Peter, more than anything, I guess. We're hoping that this pattern kind of eases up a little bit. One, to let us get ahead and get some of these drains cleaned out to the point that they can take a very substantial storm. The other side of it is, if we do get impacted tonight, we're set up very well to respond to it, unfortunately.
Thanks, Mike.
Before we cut you loose, something we would love to just spread the message further on is, again, to keep going to those agency channels for the updated information. We're working closely with our local public information officers in both Eagle and Garfield, Pitkin County, because we know the auxiliary roads are also impacted. One of the things we encourage motorists not to do is to just go to the travel apps like Waze and the Google and the Apple, because as much as Elise Thatcher on our team has been working really hard to keep those updated, sometimes those alternate routes are shown when they shouldn't be. It's really important to message that Cottonwood Pass is really only trying to put local traffic through there, but people are using it like the interstate, and it's a safety situation. We've already seen several rollover crashes occur on that roadway. And again, the operations plan that's currently in place to keep CMV from getting places they shouldn't be is what we implement when we put the closure in at exit 87 West Rifle, and then again, exit 109, which we call Canyon Creek, in that eastbound direction. So just can't get that message out there far enough, because we know not only are the locals paying attention, but we have a lot of visitors here as well.
Hey, Tracy, and if I could, this has been pretty Glenwood Canyon centric as far as the conversation, but I definitely want to point out the cooperation and the help that our local agency partners, CSP, the Office of Emergency Management, there's a lot of folks involved in this to try to make it go as smoothly as possible, and we couldn't do it without their help and their assistance. And I'm very grateful for the partnerships and the opportunity to thank them in a public forum, because they do a lot more for us than a lot of folks know. So thank you.
Mike, we have a few more questions in the chat I missed. Hayley Sanchez. Hayley, do you want to ask your question? Well, I think I can answer it. No, currently both westbound and eastbound lanes of I-70 are closed. So we won't make you say that out loud. And then Morgan, go ahead.
Curious, it sounds like the westbound is mostly the side that you guys are concerned about reopening, like the timeline is most uncertain.
No, it's actually both, Hayley. So we've got a pretty good debris flow that occurred impacting the westbound side, and there's some drainage that we're trying to clear and keep up with it. The eastbound lanes are actually pretty impacted by the debris flow that came into the river. So we currently are working with both directions of the interstate as impacted.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Morgan, you had another question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know you all don't want to write this off entirely, but it sounded like the level of concern regarding a problematic debris flow coming into Glenwood Springs is pretty minor at this point. Is that accurate? And can you all elaborate on what's kind of mitigating that concern?
So Morgan, I don't know that I'm trying to minimize it, but from the information that we received this morning, the makeup of that debris flow itself, the actual rocks and dirt, because of the compression and how it's compacted in the river, general consensus is that the majority of that material would erode slowly. The stuff that's behind it, the tree limbs and the other surface debris and things like that, it's filtering itself out slowly through the channel that's created right now. I can't tell you that it'll all be gone by the time we get a channel cut, but I don't foresee, unless we get another large debris flow or any of any substance that has a lot of trees and brush and other things in it that make it to the river. And that's based on the information we received this morning. I'm not a hydrologist, and I'm definitely not one to tell you that the specifics of it, but based on the information that we received, the Army Corps engineers felt very comfortable that we could try to divert the channel back to the center of the river a little bit if we can do that, and it will slowly dissipate.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Justin, I wanted to give you one more chance to see if your technology came online. Do you want to unmute, and are you able to jump in? Or if not, we'll probably cut everybody loose here. Oh, Greg, I've got a hand raised.
Great. This is Greg Poland, the Colorado Motor Carrier Association. First, I want to thank CDOT. I mean, you guys have been doing some extraordinary efforts, and also, you know, the patience of all the folks as we've had trucks have to be diverted to different areas. You know, we are going to look at doing an advisory for actually having any of the interstate traffic that is going through the state that doesn't have a pickup or delivery to avoid I-70 altogether until this sort of stabilizes a bit. And we think that's in the best interest of everyone. But I would ask, what is the status on US 50? And because that is the other alternate that's toward the south. And I know there's a construction project. And I think there had been some discussion, Tracy, of like, if there's any closure for any period of time on I-70, that project would be stopped and 50 would be open to that. What's the status on that? Is it open now, or how's that being handled, I guess?
So Tracy, I can take that if you want.
That'd be great.
Greg, so Highway 50 opened at noon today. It will be open again. It will be open all the way until Monday morning, barring whatever happens in Glenwood Canyon. Unfortunately, this week they were doing some blasting work, and they had some holes loaded when this happened. So part of it was we were doing the normal opening and closing times, but we because of the impacts of this, they got everything cleaned up and pulled off at noon today. And we will have the conversations with with Central Federal Lands and the contractor probably first thing Monday morning, if not Sunday night, to make the determination on what we do Monday morning.
Thank you. I mean, I think one thing is right now we only have, without that, we have everything, you know, all the interstate traffic, whether it's automobile trucks or whatever, just going to the north. And that provides some relief on this as, you know, it's sort of in terms of an alternate route to either of those. And that, so especially for folks going to the south, it could help. Thank you.
You know, I also could follow up with the point that our Traffic Operations Center in Golden is working really closely with the neighboring states, KDOT, UDOT, and YDOT, on information out on all their boards, just letting folks know the challenges we're having in Glenwood Canyon and I-70 at the moment. So they also are doing a tremendous amount of outreach to neighboring states to help us get the message further, because we know what a challenge it is. All right. Well, I will stick around if there's any other questions and let Mike and the team kind of get back to the busy days that they have been working kind of around the clock. We thank you again. If we see a need over the weekend, we will put up another media briefing call. And again, we apologize we couldn't get Justin Anderson here because that would have been a really good piece to color this conversation, but we'll keep trying if we do another media briefing. So thanks again and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
The recording has stopped.
Shoot, Jennifer, we tried with Justin's presentation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, those things never came through.
No, that's all right. I mean, I imagine he was probably, frantically trying to get his audio to work a little bit better. So
Yeah, sorry that I